Hey, what is shaking bacon? Welcome back to another book club. Trout Magic. That's our book. We're getting into it. Before we get into it, sub, like, all that jazz. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, I don't care about you. No, I'm just kidding. I love you. Subscribe to the podcast, whatever. But in this chapter, I think we see the battle between the author and I'd say confidence. And confidence in fishing can be so important. And this chapter, chapter 5, I don't even know what book club we're on. It says a kind of a fishing story, or the night I lost to Jack Sharkley. That's the name of the chapter, chapter 5. And what really goes on in this chapter is essentially the author, Robert Traver, is running for a judge position in Michigan. And, he talks about how difficult the campaign is, how he doesn't feel like he's making any headway, he's making any progress. He's trying, and he just, he's losing hope that he has a chance to win the election. He's losing, hope that his efforts are even worth it. And then he jumps at this opportunity that he has to do this casting competition with Jack Sharkley. And if you can guess by the title, he ended up losing. But, it wasn't really a competition, more of like a show thing. And you see at the end of the chapter, actually, either the cab driver or whatever vehicle they were driving talks about it. He's like, hey, like he mentioned something about fishing. He's like, hey, you like fishing? You should have seen this guy the other day casting. There was these two guys, but he distinctly remembered Jack's name. And actually he himself that was in the car was the other guy. And he was not remembered at all, even though that was the whole point. The whole point was to, gain some exposure for his campaign and whatnot, which was really funny. And so, but you just see this struggle with confidence. And I think too often in fishing, we try to win the battle against the fish without actually battling against the fish. I think too often we have these internal battles, with what we need to do. And, just the other day I was fishing and the water was dirty and I lost all my tippet because it came off my pack and floated down the river, which stinks. But I finally broke off and didn't have any more tippet to retie, so I left. And as I'm driving home, I'm pulling out of the parking spot. I'm like, I should have thrown a pink egg. Like, I should have thrown some junk. Like, I don't know why I was stuck with naturals. I mean, naturals are good, but those clearly didn't work for me today, so I should have threw something a little different. And it's just that I think we tend to overthink stuff, and we tend to care too much about how we're approaching it. And we look at our approach too much versus the goal, the end goal. And, I think that's kind of bad. Machiavelli has the ends justify the means. And I don't necessarily believe that. Like, I don't think that we should intentionally do bad things to try to achieve the same ends. However, there is an adage, like, a bad cast that catches a fish is still a good cast. Like, and this is something that I get into all the time. I was midge fishing just the other day, a couple of weeks ago now, seems like the other day. And, the fish were rising and I saw where they were rising. I threw my dry over there and sure enough, it landed short. And so what I did was right away rip it off the surface and recast it. And, that can put down fish. It certainly did put down a few fish, but just being impatient. So when I did it the next time, I actually threw the cast again, trying to get it in the seam. It didn't happen. It was a bad cast. It fell short again. Although this time I was a little bit more patient with the cast and I let it just float downstream. And I actually had a fish take farther back where I had not seen a fish rising. So just playing it out, that was a bad cast, but, I caught a fish. So it was really a bad cast. Sometimes just playing it where it lies, the golf term, it's not how you drive, it's how you arrive. How you get there. Just as long as you get there, it doesn't matter how you get there. When you're playing golf, if your strokes are 3 and you did whatever, hey, good for you. But, in the simplest form, fishing is about catching fish. And, this is where someone tells me, it's not about catching fish, and you're right. But I would also point out that a fishless day, like with idiotic banter among friends where you're throwing rocks in each other's pools, you guys are just laughing, having a good time, is a lot more enjoyable than reeling in fish after fish and being in a miserable mood by yourself. But we get caught up in this process like I was talking about. And Oftentimes we see this with the different factions of fishing. We have the dry fly, the nymphs, streamers. You got those guys that are dry fly purists. You have those people that are, like myself for a while was just a Euro nymph purist, and streamer junkies and whatnot. And we get so caught up in how to catch the fish that we don't always think about how to catch the fish. We don't always put the thought in. We don't always think that maybe I should try this. This might work a little different. And we don't really enjoy the process as much as we could, I guess. Where, while we're struggling, we could still be enjoying that because there's so much to learn from that. And one of the things that I've been doing is really just taking notes after my trips and just going back and reflecting on it. You can kind of see that in some of the videos, where I scribble on the screen and kind of explain stuff to you. And, and then just think about the things that worked and the things that didn't work. And, even today, I going back and reading through some of the case studies in Tactical Fly Fisher, which was the last book club, and just writing down some notes and thinking of some things, even those spots I fished, I think I'm going to go back and fish some of them and try these other techniques and see if they work and see if I could have done this technique better. I think that confidence, I think that, in the end, talking about the end result, the author, Robert Traver, he wins this election and he gets to go back to fishing. He doesn't have to be on the campaign trail anymore, which is a blessing for him. But we see that the process changes. He starts to enjoy the process a little bit more. He starts to lean into a little bit of what he knows, where he goes to the fly fishing thing, does a little casting, and that builds confidence. I think too often we try to do something too foreign in the beginning, and then it doesn't work out, and we lose confidence. But he switches, he does something he knows, and then you can do something foreign, and that kind of builds your confidence. And one of the things that I've been doing just the last couple of days is, I've been really, over the last couple of years, changing my fly selection. And I looked in my fly box, after, an unsuccessful trip, and I'm like, these are not the flies that I used a couple years ago. And these are the flies I used a couple years ago. I was catching my most fish on the simplest flies. I'm overcomplicating things. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's important to try new things, but I think we can also often overcomplicate things. And so I've been tying a lot of my old tried and trustworthies and just kind of going to get back into fishing those a little bit. I have a lot of faith in those flies and I know they'll still work. It's more changing it up just for my own eye or ego or whatever it is. But just kind of taking that step back and realizing that you have knowledge that you're confident in and taking advantage of it and using that to then learn and adapt these different methods, these different techniques, and then adjust from there. So plans are great, but when all else fails, we just got to throw a cast. And that was my big takeaway from this chapter, was we see him do this little casting seminar and he just throws a cast out there. And sure enough, he wins the election, and every now and again, we just throw a random cast out there and we catch a fish. So learn what you can from the bad casts and throw another one. So that's going to do it for this book club, guys. Hope you enjoy. Hope you're enjoying this. I will leave the link to the description in this book, for this book, if you want to go ahead and purchase it. It is really good. I've really enjoyed reading it. So we will see you or hear you in the next one.